forgive me, but this is a bill that's a couple of hundred pages long. It has 75 sections. And I believe that the proponent of the bill, who I appreciate very much, and we work well together on a lot of things, but I think that if you're going to bring out a bill that's brand new to this chamber, that is a culmination of multiple committees around the legislature and dozens of individual separate bills, in fact, separate bills that ought to take many hours to debate individually, all placed into one omnibus bill, a legislative buffet, if you will, where we have gone around and said, oh, we need a little of this from the Energy Committee, we need a little of this from the Environment Committee, we need a little of this from the Labor Committee, and put it all into one giant soup. And now they're making a stew and stirring the pot. And I will acknowledge there are some items in this bill that are very, very good, things that I'm actually frustrated because the bad items in the bill are going to prohibit me from being able to vote in favor of them. But this is apparently how the majority now operates. They are down to only a handful of days left to go. So the answer is, let's not try and actually do this the right way. Let's not use time management. Let's not actually debate each bill individually. Let's just cram them all into one giant, super huge omnibus document that I have to go ahead and navigate with only a few minutes to spare. So forgive me when I walk in and it's already underway before I even get to put my papers down. A little courtesy would go a long way to us working together here in this legislature. And I'm extremely frustrated that that courtesy seems to be disappearing and waning with every minute as we get closer to the end of the legislative session. As was pointed out, this bill has a lot of sections. And I appreciate the fact that the good chairman indicated that she's willing to answer questions. So the first question I have is about the process. How did we get here? Why do we have a 75-page bill that is a container, effectively, for many, many bills that ran as individual bills themselves and now just end up as a section or two or three throughout this huge document? And how did we get to a point where we're including lobsters and double utility poles in a labor bill? Through you.
Thank you. Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. The good senator, I think, understands that it's not uncommon in this chamber, in this legislature, to have omnibus bills such as this. I will say we haven't had very many in the Labor Committee, but it is not uncommon, and it exists throughout this legislature. Each one of these bills touches the cognizance of our Labor Committee and is appropriately before us.
Thank you. Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Well, I appreciate the gentlelady's answer, except I couldn't disagree more. This is not common. I mean, sometimes we will put a couple of different bills from the same committee into one document, especially if they have some connection with one another. And frankly, the double utility poles has nothing to do with the Labor Committee. That is a bill that went through the Energy Committee. In fact, I might remind everyone that's why we have different committees. That's why we have an Energy Committee, frankly, and why we have a Labor Committee, so that the Labor Committee can take up labor bills and the Energy Committee can take up energy bills. And the lobster bill, I don't know that it ever actually went through a committee, but if it did, it would have gone through probably the Environment Committee. I know nothing about lobsters. I don't live near the shore. I do know I like a good lobster roll. And I'm fearful that the section about lobsters actually might be harmful to that end. But I will digress and suggest that we don't normally do this. And the idea that we do, this is akin to what I would call a baby implementer. Anyone that's ever been involved in the Connecticut General Assembly knows that normally what happens in a budget year is we have a budget document, which is nothing more than a collection of numbers. How much is going to be distributed throughout our state government to the various agencies. And then there's a bill that goes with it called the implementer bill, which is the policy that goes behind it. And in recent years, that implementer bill has become the catch-all for the majority. anything they don't manage to achieve through the normal process, the process that respects the people of Connecticut, the process that is, as most people imagine, that we have public hearings, the public is invited to come and participate in the process and share their views on things. Those things are all falling by the wayside as the majority becomes more and more arrogant and more willing to go ahead and skip the rules, skip the procedures, skip any respect for the process in favor of getting whatever they want through, no matter what. And this bill is symptomatic of that. It's appalling, frankly. And I guarantee you, if we went out on the street and we grabbed people, regardless of their political affiliation, and asked them, how do you feel about the legislature taking up a bill with a few days to go, where they took 100 other bills and slammed them into one thing, gave almost no notice to the opposition, and expected it to be debated? Let's start at the very beginning. Section number 1, through you, Madam President. Can the gentlelady tell me what section number 1 is about?
Thank you, Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. Through you, Section 1 deals with the situation where healthcare providers and teachers are assaulted by someone while they're carrying out their duties at work.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I understand that that's what it deals with, but what does Section 1 do, through you?
Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. This will provide that workers' compensation will be adjusted to provide replacement of 100% of their wages.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I don't want to continue to come across as antagonistic, because I do want to get to the bottom of this for the people of the state of Connecticut. That is my obligation. But we're going to have to do better with our responses than the short, quick responses that I'm getting, because the section of the bill is several pages long, and if it was a little smaller, I might hold it up for the world to see. All the underlying text is brand new. It says a lot more than what we just heard, and there's a few pages of this. So I understand that this section deals with both healthcare workers, and presumably I noticed the word volunteering, so maybe the good chairman can tell me whether a simple volunteer for a hospital is included in this. And it also looks like people that work as teachers, but it also would include members and other employees of schools. So it's a pretty broad group of people, but basically those folks in the healthcare field and the education field are going to be given additional benefits for workers' comp versus people that work in other occupations. Am I correct about that, through you, Madam President?
Thank you, Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. This bill does, in fact, give 100% replacement of wages and provides for health benefits through the workers' compensation system, and it is specifically it is meant to cover all of the workers in a healthcare facility who engage with patients or members of the family of a patient, or in an educational setting deals with students, and all of the workers that deal with students in those situations if such employee is assaulted while carrying out their duties. And there have been provisions for this in the past in certain circumstances. This is comprehensive in making sure that we're taking care of the people that we know are put in these kinds of situations. Through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Certainly, I don't want to begrudge folks that work in the healthcare or education arenas from being compensated. God forbid they are ever harmed while on the job. But what I'm confused about, Madam President, is why we are singling out these two occupations so that they would receive substantially more workers' compensation than people that work in other jobs. The standard workers' compensation provides 75% of the average weekly wage for total incapacity with a floor of 20%. This now gives folks 100% if they are in the healthcare or education fields. Also, it covers all their medical bills, wages for court appearances, and would include a number of other benefits that are not allotted to people that are in other professions. So can I just ask, Madam President, I'm for this, okay? But what I'm trying to understand is, why are we treating these two types of professionals different than everybody else? Are these types of people more important than people that work in other jobs? Is that what the majority is saying? We're going to give workers' compensation benefits that are extra special for healthcare workers and for teachers, and everybody else, they can go back to having the minimalistic work comp that everybody else gets through you?
Thank you, Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. Throughout our statutes, there are special sections that deal with similar situations for different kinds of employees. So while we are addressing in this bill teachers and healthcare workers, we know, and other teachers and other educational staff and healthcare workers in these facilities, throughout statutes, there are other parts of the statute that provide extra benefits for particular types of work.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I believe the answer was yes. I believe the answer is yes. The Connecticut Democrats believe that if you fall into these two categories, that you are more important when it comes to your workers' compensation than people that do not fall into these two categories. I have a problem with that. As much as I want to help healthcare providers and teachers, I do not believe that it is appropriate for this legislature to be putting people into categories and suggesting merely because of the type of work that they do that they're more important than someone else or entitled to something different. And I say this knowing that I have people in my family that work in those professions. I was recently married and my wife is a teacher. And I guarantee you, if I asked her, she would agree. She would say, like, why would we give special benefits to people because they're teachers? Teachers are definitely important, and healthcare folks are important, but so are everybody else. So are people that work as first responders, or people that manufacture things, or frontline workers in a retail store. Everyone should be treated equally under our laws. And to be making these arbitrary decisions at the cost of taxpayers and, by the way, workers' compensation premium payers, to me is unfair and concerning. And there's probably a lot more to this section, through you, Madam President. I mean, I was just notified that this bill was going to be here in front of us as a possibility late last night, and only informed that we were starting with it within the hour. 200-something pages. So I have not read every word of it, and it infuriates me because I tell my constituents all the time, I read all the bills. But I can only read all the bills when I know which bills I'm supposed to be reading, right? And there are thousands of bills floating around in this building. There's 4 days to go, and I don't know how many of those bills are actually going to come before us. I don't know which ones. I don't know if they're going to look the same, because notoriously the majority likes to change the bill at the very moment that it's brought to the floor for debate via some sort of amendment. And in fact, this bill is a product of numerous changes, and as I mentioned, none of this came out of committee the way it appears now. And we could have a conversation about what sections received a public hearing and which did not, although I don't think it would really tell us much, because even the sections that did get a public hearing probably don't look the same. And sections that got a public hearing in the Energy Committee means nothing to me. I don't serve on the Energy Committee. I didn't hear the testimony. I don't know what the concerns were. Just like I don't know anything about lobsters. Thankfully, I think we're going to hear from one of my colleagues that does. So let's go on to Section 2, which is about wage transparency. Can the gentlelady, through you, Madam President, explain to me what Section 2 is about?
Thank you, Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. And I did want to make one correction, just make it clear if I wasn't clear. Relative to the teachers that are covered under workers' compensation, they've always had 100% reimbursement. This does two things. It consolidates it under the workers' comp statute, and it also is intended to allow teachers to receive workers' compensation in this way without having to prove the intent of the student was to harm the teacher. And so it's a cleanup, and it's something actually that teachers have had for decades. But moving on to Section 2, wage ranges. This is intended to require employers to, upon a request of the employee and certain other circumstances, to provide the information regarding not only wage ranges, which we already have in statute, but also benefits that would be associated with the position, either when they're first applying for the job, or whether it's applying for a promotion in that workplace. So it expands our current statute to require the employer to give a general description, and it repeatedly says general description of benefits that they would be receiving in that job. Through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Since we touched back on Section 1, which has to do with the workers' compensation, I would just make one final point that I did not make that's quite clear listening to the description of what's going on, and that is that these are benefits that in most circumstances would be collectively bargained. These are things that ultimately would be negotiated. This is things that a union would have a negotiator dealing with the state or the municipality or the hospital in whatever situation it is. There would be something going on that would make sure that these things were properly negotiated. What's happening here is the majority party is taking one side of that negotiation and choosing to negotiate on their behalf without a negotiation at all. Basically just putting things into statute so that they can no longer be negotiated. And I will point out that there's a danger in that for both sides, which is that when you start to eliminate the ability for the parties to collectively bargain, even if you're giving them a thing that they might have bargained for, you're denying their ability to negotiate for something else that they would have preferred. And it's a danger that cannot be overstated. I did not hear a detailed explanation of Section 2, and that's what I'm looking for, which is to understand what problem we're trying to solve with Section 2. What does Section 2 actually do, and what problem are we trying to solve? Through you.
Thank you, Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. As I said, this is a section of the bill that will require employers to be transparent about the wage ranges and the benefits associated with positions that are being applied for. And the intent here is to make sure that workers who are in these positions are not come in a way where they're not aware of what the range is, so that they could perhaps accept something much lower. We really are trying to address the situation where we're trying to reach more equity, pay equity in the workplace. Through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Are there any complaints to justify the need for this, or I might say this level of intervention in what is historically a private negotiation between an employer and employee? Through you.
Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm sorry, I have to ask the good gentleman to repeat the question.
Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. There is a debate going on in this chamber, and I notice there's a lot of side conversations. I've seen a couple of tours go through and a lot of distractions, and I also noticed that my colleague that I'm asking questions to seems to be engaging in a number of sidebars. I don't want to be standing up here having to repeat my questions because the majority is not interested in answering my questions or even hearing them. So frankly, I'll do this a few times, but I'm going to get more and more aggravated. We have to operate with a level of respect. I walked in here indicating that I don't feel respected. And it's not me that I'm worried about. It's about the 100,000 people that I represent back home. Okay? They elect me to come here, just like they elect all of us, to be here exercising their freedom and their rights to make sure that we're on the record about things. I deserve to make sure that I got the information in front of me in a timely manner. I should be warned in a proper manner. And when I'm asking questions, I deserve to be listened to. So I asked if there was any data to justify this extraordinary level of intervention into what is typically a private negotiation between an employer and an employee. Through you.
Thank you, Senator Sampson, and we do hear you, and we will ask our guests and our staff to be respectful and to not make noise so that we can hear the debate, sir. Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. And just for the record, I understand my good colleagues' frustration, and we'll pay very close attention. But I do have other colleagues in the room who I wanted to make aware there may be sections that they have something to offer on in response to your questions, and so that was the purpose for the distraction. To your question, I'm not aware of any studies or data that has been put forward other than things that might have been mentioned in the public hearing. Through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I appreciate your remarks and the chairman as well. And hopefully we can stick to the debate and keep it respectful and get to the bottom of what is being proposed here. My concern with this section, which I will just explain as thoroughly as I can, is a section that would require employers, before there's ever a negotiation with a potential new hire, to disclose the salary range for the job. Now, in a vacuum, by itself, that doesn't sound unreasonable. In fact, a lot of people do post job postings and suggest what the range for the job is. Makes perfect sense. The thing is that not everything is created equal. Not every employee is created equal. Not every job is created equal. And very often, especially when you talk about small businesses, they're not exactly sure what they're going to get for applicants. They may be looking for one particular position, and they might end up with an applicant that they feel fits a different role, or might take on some of the responsibilities for the role they were advertising for and some different responsibilities for another role that could be created. Who knows? So the idea that we must fit everyone inside a box, it also concerns me that the majority tends to look at employees as if they are interchangeable cogs in a machine, that you can just take one out and plug another like that. Some people are more skilled than others in different areas. And you take any business that has multiple employees that allegedly have the same position, I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt, if you start asking the employer and those employees, they're going to say, well, you know, Mary's really good at customer service, but maybe her math's not the best. You know, you got to go talk to John if you want to make sure you get the right answers on the spreadsheet, even though they might have the same exact occupation. So the idea that somehow people are the same and they ought to be compensated the same for the same job is not true or fair. Not to mention the fact that people are often compensated based on a lot of other factors that might not even be about their work. It might be about the length of service, or how reliable or responsible or loyal to the company they might be. Like this particular employee and this other employee might do very much the same work every day, but one of them, the business owner or management, trusts to actually unlock the door in the morning or to take the bank deposits. And the other one, they don't. So who's worth more to the employer? I'm just throwing out some things so people get an understanding of why these policies that are allegedly protections for employees are not protections for anyone. They're violations of the rights of both parties to engage in a free negotiation. It's a constant frustration. Almost every day we're here because the majority claims to be protecting someone or helping someone. Well, when you're denying their freedom, when you're taking away their rights to decide for themselves, you are not helping anyone. People are smart. I got faith in them to figure it out. Does the proponent, through you, Madam President, does the proponent of this section of the legislation, and again, we're on Section 2 of 75, are jobs actually uniform? Does the proponent believe that every person hired into a role has the same value? Through you.
Thank you, Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. No.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. And if there was a job posting and there were multiple applicants and one of them had no experience at all, and another one was coming from the business's greatest competitor and had 25 years of stellar experience and could offer so much more than even just doing the job, would they very likely end up being offered the same amount through you?
Thank you, Senator Kushner.
Not necessarily, through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you, Madam President. So if all that's true, then why is it that we would require the employer to put a uniform salary range through you?
Thank you, Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. Through you, it does make a person aware of what the range is, but it does not require the employer to either offer them those wages or benefits or hire them, and it doesn't require the employee who's applying to accept an offer if it doesn't fall within that range. It's simply to make them aware of what the range would be.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. In other words, it's pointless. It's utterly, completely pointless, except for the fact that what it's going to do is it's going to create an expectation. It's going to create an expectation for the employee. And, for example, if I was hiring for a certain position in my company and I said the wage range is $50,000 to $75,000, and then someone came and applied for the job, and then I offered them the job at the $50,000. Through you, Madam President, can you see where that might create a little bit of friction through you?
Thank you, Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. I believe that's a subjective question, and I don't think I can answer that. Through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'll answer it. Yes, it's going to create friction. That's what's going to happen. So when you create bills like this, where you're stirring the pot between employers and employees, I'll just share something with everyone, which is that the Labor Committee, which I serve on with my good colleague, the chairman, to me is one of the most frustrating places to ever be. Because when you're sitting there in this committee, generally speaking, everyone in the room is divided up. We're on the side of the employers, and we're on the side of the employees. I'm not on anyone's side. I want everyone treated equally under the law. I want everyone to have opportunity to negotiate their contract with the other side on even terms, on an even playing field. But you can't do that in there. They won't let you. It's just like, no, we're going to do a bill for the employer. No, we're going to do a bill for the employee. And because of the makeup of the committee and the fact that the Democrats have a majority and their focus is constantly on pushing the envelope for collective bargaining, they're always on the side of organized labor. And that doesn't mean they're on the side of the organized labor employees. Don't mistake that. They're on the side of organized labor, and they are always antagonistic to employers. So for me, it's extremely frustrating because I end up defending the employers all the time, which is not my goal. I go in there trying to be fair. But when I'm being told that the bill is going to unlevel the playing field against employers, I end up having to take that side. Nothing is more frustrating. Trust me when I tell you. So this is just another one of those examples. And this is a bill all by itself. Section 2 was a bill all by itself. I don't know the bill number off the top of my head, but we debated this bill. We had a hearing on this bill, and it went through the committee. But here it is. It found its way into this giant omnibus. I had to put it in a binder because I couldn't find a chip or a clip big enough for this document. And thank heavens for my outstanding legislative aide, who was helpful in putting this together, so I might have some ability to make some sense out of it at this point. But here it is, put into this giant, chock full of nuts, smorgasbord bill that contains soup to nuts, you name it, lobsters, utility poles, and salary ranges, apparently. I'm opposed to this section, and I think it's a big mistake. Who determines the salary range through you, Madam President?
Thank you, Senator Kushner.
Thank you, through you, Madam President, the employer.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Are there any limitations through you, Madam President, on how wide the range can be?
Thank you, Senator Kushner.
Through you, Madam President, no.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Is there anything that prohibits an employer from putting $0 to $1 million through you?
Senator Kushner.
Through you, Madam President, it's hard to answer that question because of the fact that it is not something that I think would ever happen. But if an employer were trying to circumvent the law, which one might think they were doing in that case, I imagine someone could bring a case against them. Through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam President. We got to where I wanted to go, which is someone may bring a case against them. So here it is. You have an employer who's honestly got a broadly defined position at their company, but they may be looking for someone that might be doing outside sales or inside sales or customer service, and they're exploring and interviewing a wide range of people, and the amount of compensation that any one of those people might be offered could be wildly different. But yet you're creating an expectation by telling the company they have to put this data out in front of people. And now if they're offered a job on the lower end of the spectrum or something that doesn't conform with what was actually advertised, there is a cause of action created. Now people can start to sue employers for failing to properly disclose a salary range. It's an absurdity, frankly. We already proved that the thing is more or less meaningless anyway, and all it's likely to do is to create strife between employers and employees. Now, who wants that? Not me. I'll tell you who wants that. People that like to make laws that create that strife so that they can use it for political purposes to play this group against that group. Instead of recognizing that very often people in business and industry get along very well as employers and employees. I have had employees and I have been an employee. And when I was an employer, I treated my employees well. I made them understand that the better off we did as a company, a corporation, a group, the better off they would be as well. And guess what? It was true because I meant it. And I've worked for companies that felt the same way too. And to the point of the majority, not every situation is so fair and reasonable. I've worked for people that are real jerks too. And you know what I did? I quit. That's what I did. Because I wasn't going to work for people that I didn't respect or appreciate. And that's the beauty of living in a free country, is that all of that is possible. You can be an employee, you can be an employer, you can work hard, you can achieve anything in this great land of America. What is the impact, through you, Madam President, that we see on lower-end candidates? Do you see any potential that we might discourage people from even applying for a job based on the salary range through you?
Thank you, Senator Kushner.
Through you, Madam President, I don't think that will be a major concern. I don't think that will happen.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. You don't think it will happen, or it will not happen through you?
Thank you, Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. Again, it's a subjective, you're asking for a subjective opinion on this, and my subjective opinion is I don't think it will happen.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Yes, I'm asking for a subjective opinion about a bill that was drafted without any data or common sense entirely. It's completely and utterly subjective. It's ridiculous on its face. So all I've got to respond to it with is more subjectivity. That's all I can do. And it's common sense to say that if you're going to put a job listing out there and it's the range is between $60,000 and $70,000 for XYZ job, and there's somebody who's fresh out of school, who's never actually worked in that field anymore, and they've been competing for jobs that were paid for less than that, they may just look at that listing and go, you know what, I'm never going to get that job. I'm never going to get that job because they're not going to pay me $60,000. There's way more qualified people in the world. Forget it. I'm just not even going to go. And that's terrible. Because, Madam President, I'm going to tell you as somebody who's worked in the industry of hiring people, I've done it in real estate and in insurance, the fact of the matter is sometimes somebody walks into your office applying for a job and you're like, I can't give you that job, but I could give you a different job, or I could give you an entry-level position that might become that job in a year. But the busybodies in Hartford who think they know better and we're not smart enough to figure it out on our own, they want to have this bill, which might just discourage that person forever walking in to apply for the job. It's dangerous. Not to mention the fact that we're talking mostly about the employees, but this bill seems to think that everyone is a big corporation, right? Everyone, we're going to have some corporate mentality and we're going to sit around the boardroom and we're going to do a job posting on Indeed and we're going to do this. There are plenty of other ways that jobs are posted. There are small businesses that are still grappling with what they even want their employees to do. They're maybe hiring their first employee ever. They're not even sure what they need from them. How do they comply with this? I fully expect this to generate lawsuits and at the very least discourage some people from applying for jobs. And frankly, even if it's one, we often say if we save one life, well, if we discourage one person from getting a job through a meaningless busybody mandate on businesses in the state, which is a whole other subject, by the way, and I encourage people that are watching to pay attention as we go through all 75 sections of this bill one by one. How many of them are likely to discourage businesses from wanting to operate in the state of Connecticut, knowing full well that the states around us don't have any of this junk, and there are places like Florida that are like completely open and willing to take people that want to work and create industry and opportunity, unlike Connecticut, where we just want more regulation and more strife. I also believe that this bill will lead to something that I would refer to as market distortion, because now you're going to have employers out there who are compelled to do job listings that show a certain salary range. And that's going to mean that their competitors are going to see that, and they're going to have to go ahead and do the same thing. So all of these job listings are going to get screwed up. I believe that's the technical term. Right? It doesn't make any sense to go ahead and put these requirements on businesses, not understanding the fact that they are not in a cookie-cutter ones and zeros world. Jobs are different. Things are malleable. Things change. Somebody might post a listing for an employee, and then they have someone show up and they're like, no, I'm going to recreate the entire job for that person based on their skill set. And then that whole salary range thing's out the window. Or they might decide they're going to hire two people instead of one because they realized in the process of interviewing that it probably would work out better. These are real world situations that have not been contemplated by the majority, despite the fact that we've had this bill and similar bills in previous years, and I bring this stuff up every time. And this bill, when it passed out of the committee, passed out on a party line vote. There was no compromise. There was no bipartisanship. There was no effort to accommodate the views of the minority, including this kid here. We just passed it out, and now we're putting in this omnibus bill because we can. So let me just ask one final question on Section 2, and then we can move on. And it's basically just a core philosophical question, and that is, do you believe that compensation in the private sector should be determined by government mandate or a structure created by government for how jobs are listed, or should it be negotiated by the parties without any intervention through you?
Thank you, Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. And I've interacted with the good senator for a number of years now, and I'm pretty sure he knows how I feel about this, that it is the responsibility of government to set into law standards to really make sure that as a state we can thrive, where we're making sure that workers are treated well and fairly in the workplace, and a lot of that is done through statute. And yes, I do believe that's appropriate, not only appropriate, but I believe it's our responsibility. Through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. And I appreciate the gentlelady's answer. I knew what it was already. But I asked because I wanted people who were listening to ask themselves the same question. And I would venture to guess that the majority of people, and I'm certainly not all of them, I'm quite certain many of them will agree with the chairman, but I really do believe that if we started asking people on the street, most of them would say, I think people can figure this out. And it would be far better for the parties to negotiate the terms than to have the government set up such a structure as we are in Section 2. And with that, Madam President, because I'm so confident that the people of Connecticut are on my side, I'd like to offer an amendment.
Thank you, Senator Kushner.
This,
Oh, I do apologize, Senator Sampson. Sorry.
It's quite all right. It's early yet, Madam President. The clerk is in possession of an amendment. It's LCO 5544. And I ask the clerk, please call this amendment, and I be given leave of the chamber to summarize.
Mr. Clerk.
LCO 5544 will be designated said amendment Schedule A.
And let's wait till we have, there we go. Senator Sampson, please proceed to summarize, sir.
Thank you very much, Madam President. This is a very straightforward amendment. All it does is strike Section 2 of this 75-section bill, which is the section we've been debating, which has to do with a mandate on businesses in the state of Connecticut requiring them to post what I consider to be a meaningless salary range, because that's not how the world works. I move adoption, and I ask for a roll call vote.
Thank you. We will have a roll call on the amendment. Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. I would urge my colleagues to vote no on this amendment. Through you, Madam President.
Thank you. Will you remark further on the amendment? Will you remark further on the amendment? If not, I will open the voting machine. Mr. Clerk, please announce the vote.
An immediate roll call has been ordered in the Senate. An immediate roll call has been ordered in the Senate.
Voted. The machine is locked. Mr. Clerk, the tally, please.
Total number voting 36. Those voting yea 11. Those voting nay 25. Those absent 0.
Amendment fails. Will you remark further on the bill, Senator Sampson?
Thank you very much, Madam President. That concludes our discussion of Section 2. I'm disappointed the amendment failed, but not surprised, of course, that it failed on a party line vote. It looks that my arguments that I thought were very pointed and very accurate, that such a requirement for a salary range is not really a workable thing out in the real world for industry. It is just a concept developed by political minds for some sort of daring policy adventure, and not necessarily something that ought to achieve any benefit for the people of our state, which is what I'd like to remind everyone is our purpose here. It is to make policy that is conducive to the benefit of the people of Connecticut. And in my view, we should stay in our lane, number one, and we should emphasize individual liberty first and foremost, and not more regulation, more rules, and more impediments to success, which is what this bill is in many respects. I will repeat once again, out of the 75 sections, there are a number of sections that are outstanding, and I am extremely disappointed and even aggravated that I'm going to end up voting no on this omnibus bill at the end of the day, because I wanted to vote for yes on a number of these things. I would have co-sponsored these items. I would have been the biggest cheerleader for a number of the items in this bill, but they are sandwiched together with a bunch of things that are not so hot, to say the very least. It's like somebody's made you your favorite deli sandwich and then they put your least favorite ingredient on it, ruining the whole lunch experience. My experience is similar today. So Section 3, Madam President, I'm hoping the good chairman can tell me what Section 3 is all about.
Thank you. Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. Section 3 establishes a work group to study the ability and the feasibility of putting together an electronic database that will manage healthcare systems to provide information when a patient enters a hospital or a healthcare facility, if that patient has a previous record of having, or a documented history of having been violent toward a healthcare provider, that will begin to gather that information. And this is really to make sure that the people who are going to care for this person, this patient, have all the information they need to make sure they can care for the person safely. Through you, Madam President.
Thank you. Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. The first question I have about Section 3 is whether all of this language that is here, it looks like 3 paragraphs, A, B, and C, is all of this language new? And the reason why I'm asking is because normally right after where it says the section number, it would say new. And this one says effective from passage, which may imply that the whole thing is new. But I just thought it was interesting that throughout this bill, sometimes we have new written next to the section, and sometimes we don't. But I do believe this section is all new, and I'd just like to confirm that through you.
Thank you. Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. Through you, yes, it is new.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I'm sympathetic to the notion that we need to protect people that work in the healthcare field, particularly from violent patients. And I suspect this may stem out of a tragedy that occurred a couple of years ago where a woman was out delivering medication to someone who was extremely dangerous and was murdered in the process. I don't know if that is affected under this language or not, but it certainly does beg the question, what are we doing to improve that situation to make sure that something like that does not happen again? I'm a little confused about what we're doing here. It sounds to me like we're creating a database of violent patients. Is that right, through you, Madam President?
Thank you, Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. What we're doing here is creating a working group to examine all of the issues that might arise in creating an electronic system that would provide histories of a person who has a documented history of violence in these settings. And I think that this working group will examine all of the concerns and questions that might arise and take into consideration what would be the best way to accomplish this. But the goal is clearly to make sure not only that the caregiver is safe, but also to make sure that they're prepared to ensure the safety of the patient. Through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. If only it were true. If only the response we heard matched the words on paper. You know, that's what I would say we should be doing, exactly as the chairman did, which is we should be putting a working group in charge of coming up with a plan to assess this problem and develop a solution. But that's not what's happening. The bill creates a working group, but the working group is very specific in its instructions on what it should be doing. And under section A2, which I believe begins on line 226, it says that alerts a healthcare provider with such electronic health records, which is the aforementioned violent incident, when the provider accepts a new patient or has scheduled a visit with an existing patient who has a documented history of any such incidents. So it is explicit in the language of the bill before us that the working group is going to figure out how to track and create a database of so-called violent patients. Am I reading that incorrectly? Through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. As I said before, the intent, I believe that we're on the same page. The intent of this piece of legislation is to put together a working group that will look at what it would take to put together a database that would provide this information to healthcare providers when a patient enters for care. And I think the working group will be charged with that responsibility.
Let us have a moment. Do we need a...
Can we pause for a moment?
Yes, we're going to pause for a moment, and we'll see if we need a healthcare professional. All right. Senator Kushner, we'll go back to you when you're ready. Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. As I was saying, this working group will have as its instructions to establish, consider what it would be to study the feasibility, it says very specifically, and considerations necessary to implement this system. Through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Yes, it does say that, but it does say what it's supposed to be doing. Create a database of violent patients. And for me, that's a bad idea. Is this database going to stick with people through their entire lives? Is this database going to be able to be sold by a hospital network, for example? Is this information going to be shared with law enforcement authorities? Is this database going to create a situation where someone might be impacted for the entire rest of their life on Earth? I don't know. I think it's a dangerous thing to do, to start putting people in a database based on the circumstances of one incident, which may be in dispute, in fact. So, on the one hand, I agree. Let's come up with a solution. Let's try and prevent what happened as a terrible tragedy a couple of years ago. Let's prevent any unnecessary risks that healthcare professionals might have to take when they come in contact with patients who might be violent. And more importantly, why on earth are we still utilizing a system where we send people out on the errand of delivering medication to some people that might be actually dangerous in the world? It just blows me away. This is a result of a major shift in how we handle mental health in our state. You know, there was a move a number of years ago to eliminate the institutionalization of certain types of patients. And while I think that there was some merit in the idea that we didn't want to lock people up in a facility, I also think that maybe there's some people that are better off there, not only for the safety of the people that have to treat them, but also for the patients themselves. And I think it's a mistake. We should have thought twice about it. We should have found a way to create a balance between these ideas so that the people that really did need to be institutionalized because of their danger to themselves and to others was recognized. And maybe, just maybe, that unfortunate incident that I've referred to a couple of times may not have occurred. So this section is kind of important to me, and I'm disappointed, once again, that I didn't have any input in what this section says. It's just put in the bill. We're going to create a database of violent patients, and that's that. No conversation about modifying the way we handle patients with violent historical past, people that the healthcare provider who is going to visit them, particularly if they're traveling to their home, how those things should be handled, what kind of notification they should have. So while I can see the potential benefit on one side of this, I don't know that it's going to be handled in a way that will be ultimately beneficial or truly fair from a civil liberties standpoint to people that are involved, and that concerns me. Madam President, through you, the working group that is in Section 3, I believe, has got to provide some sort of findings back to the General Assembly. I just want to confirm with the chairman that at the time that happens, that we will indeed consider more avenues than simply creating such a database, which might be concerning from a civil rights perspective for the people that are in the database. Through you.
Thank you, Senator Kushner.
Through you, Madam President, the legislation would require that the working group report its findings not later than January 1st, 2027, to the Joint Committee of the General Assembly having cognizance over matters relating to public health. I can certainly say that if I am in this legislature, I know that the Labor Committee will take a great interest in this report as well, and that any findings of that committee would be probably the basis for legislation in the future. Through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I'm just hopeful that when that report does return to the General Assembly and the Labor Committee is contemplating legislation, God willing, I will be here to be part of the conversation, and I am hopeful that the majority will take into consideration some of my comments here today, and that we can work together to come up with something that is policy that is truly beneficial to the people of Connecticut, that might prevent similar tragedies and keep people safe while also protecting their civil rights. For me, those are important and not mutually exclusive endeavors, and we should try and do both of them. Let's move on to Section 4 out of this 75-page omnibus bill. Section 4, I have in my notes, deals with employment promissory notes. Through you, Madam President, can the chairman explain to me what an employment promissory note is and what is happening in this section? Through you.
Thank you, Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. In Section 4 of this bill, the existing statute is modified. There is a definition in statute currently of what the promissory note entails. This piece of legislation modifies the current existing law. Previously, it would have only applied to employers who are engaged more than 26 employees. Now this would apply to all employers, through you, Madam President. But the definition of promissory note is in the existing statute, through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I can read the existing statute, but I'm trying to engage the chairman in a debate that is a public tool for informing the people of Connecticut and the press and anyone watching, including our colleagues, on what's happening here. So could the good chairman explain to us what is meant by an employment promissory note? And maybe beyond simply the language that's indicated here, I'm trying to understand what the goal of this section is, through you.
Thank you, Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. In the state of Connecticut, we have existing law that prohibits an employer from requiring an employer signing a promissory note upon employment that they would have to repay the employer for certain trainings in particular is what's usually focused on if they would leave the employer. And this is, as I said, in statute already, and I think anyone who's interested in the public can certainly look it up. Through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I appreciate that answer. And I appreciate the definition from the perspective of the chairman that an employment promissory note is a situation where an employer may take on an employee and agree to pay for their training or their equipment or their tools for the job, and may stipulate that they have got to work through a certain period of time. Otherwise, that employee might be required to pay back some of that advance expenditure that the employer has made. What I also had asked the chairman, which I did not receive an answer to, was what are we trying to achieve here? Why are we restricting this activity, and why are we changing the requirement from businesses with more than 26 employees down to any business? Through you.
Thank you, Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. I believe that what we are trying to do here is to make sure that this section of law that is currently in statute, that we make sure that we are now covering all employees, that we think it's good public policy to protect employees in the instance where an employer might try and exact a promissory note that is unlawful under current statutes. And I think that oftentimes we start with larger employers and then move to smaller employers as we see how it works and if that would be workable with the smaller employers. In this case, we think that it would be. Through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. The first thing I would see is let that answer be a lesson to anyone negotiating labor legislation in this building heretofore. That very often policies come before the Connecticut General Assembly that stipulate only businesses that have 500 employees or more, 50 employees or more, 26 employees or more. But invariably, inevitably, they always come back to affect everybody down to small entities that have one employee, for example, much like we did with the paid sick leave legislation a couple of years ago, which I know has put such an unbelievable cramp in the ability of a lot of small businesses. I have a friend who runs a business who has one employee, and that person has got the key to the store. And the paid sick leave legislation basically allows that employee to just call in, or not even call in. I think they can even, under the law, call in after. No doctor's note, nothing. So the store just doesn't open that day. Yeah, that's what the state of Connecticut creates with their mandates and their policies. That's the first thing I would caution people, is when you see something that says 50 or more, don't assume it's going to stay that way, because it's not going to. It's ultimately going to expand into more avenues. This is what this type of policy ultimately signals when you see it. But what's more interesting is that in this particular case, we heard the chairman suggest that this is good public policy that protects employees. And remember what we're talking about, folks. We're talking about a policy that basically allows people to get a job, training for a job, or materials and equipment to do a job in advance from an employer, based on the understanding that they've got to make a counter commitment to the employer that they're going to stay on the job for some period of time, or they might have to pay it back. That's the employment promissory note that we're referring to. So can I just ask very, very simply, protect employees how?
Thank you, Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. It protects employees from having to, as a condition of employment, agree to repay for instance, training prior to taking the job. Through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I hope people are listening, they're paying attention, that they're comprehending what's going on. The majority has got Section 4 in this giant omnibus Italian sub that includes protections for employees, meaning preventing them from getting a job and training for a job. That's what they got here. We're protecting employees. We are going to stop you from learning how to be a mechanic. We are going to stop you from learning how to be a machinist. We are going to stop you from having a set of tools to be an apprentice on some sort of job. We are going to stop you from becoming an airline pilot. We're going to stop you from learning a skill set that might take you through a career in the future. That's the majority's way of protecting employees. It's absurd. It is utterly absurd. And it's another example where they have declared themselves, the majority party in this state, as the decider of what's best for you as a citizen in Connecticut. You're too stupid to figure it out yourself. They're going to tell you you couldn't possibly be smart enough to go to work for a machine shop and have them send you to school that costs thousands and thousands of dollars to get you started, because they don't want you to make a foolish mistake where you might actually get that opportunity. This is like one of the worst things that I've seen in this building. This policy has been floating around for a while. And the idea that somehow the majority thinks, A, that they have the right and ability to do this is the first shocking thing. This is something that should be negotiated between the parties. If I own a business and I want to hire an employee and they come to me and they got no tools to do the job, and I say, well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to buy your tools. It's going to cost a few $1,000, but all I expect from you is that, you put in an effort and you work here for 6 months. If you don't, you're going to have to give me back those tools, or you're going to have to pay for them. This bill says, no, you can't do that. That's what it says. It's ludicrous. Why would we stop that? How is that protecting employees? The only people you'd be protecting is employees from themselves, which means you have no confidence that the employee can make up their own mind whether it's a good arrangement for them or not? What if an employer says, we're going to send you to college as a condition of employment, but only as long as you're an employee here? If you don't stay an employee here, guess what? You're going to have to take care of the bill yourself. Is that so terrible? Is that so wicked that we have to stop that from happening? It's nuts. It's frankly nuts. I'm going to ask one more time. I want to hear one solid argument about why this is a good idea and why we have to protect people from themselves. Through you.
Thank you, Senator Kushner.
Through you, Madam President. I do want to point out to the good senator, I'm sure he already knows this, but this existing statute has been in law since 1985. We have functioned extremely well as a state and been very productive with this law on the books. It only, I think it's good public policy because now, after seeing it work for so many decades, I think it's good public policy to ensure that every employee has access to these protections. Through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you, Madam President. I didn't hear any strong argument. I heard this law has been on the books in some form, and it's not the same law. The current law affects businesses with 26 or more employees. It doesn't affect a small business or a contractor who's taken on an apprentice or a small insurance office that wants to get a new insurance producer licensed with the state of Connecticut and all of their skills, to take on the job. It doesn't, a real estate company. I mean, you can just name a whole bunch of things, of where you might run into this. A veterinary office where they want to send someone to school to be a vet tech. You could just come up with 1,000 ways that people could get involved and have new careers and new experiences and become, productive members of our society with an actual occupation, a job, a skill set that this bill says no. Those opportunities are illegal. It's madness. And when asked for any evidence to the contrary, any suggestion that this is good policy that actually protects people, the argument is, well, it's been on the books, we've been fine. It's only been on the books for large companies, which is wrong there too. And in fact, we ought to repeal that entire section of statute. But for now, I'm going to just attempt to take this piece out of the bill. Through you, Madam President, I have an amendment. It is LCO 5577. I'm hopeful that the clerk has that in his possession, and he can call that amendment, and I'd be given leave of the chamber to summarize.
Mr. Clerk.
LCO number 5577, Senate Amendment B.
Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Super simple amendment. It says strike Section 4 in its entirety. Remember, this is the section that would create a state mandate prohibiting what they refer to as employment promissory notes and what I refer to as actual opportunities. I move adoption, and I'd like a roll call vote.
Thank you. We will have a roll call vote on the amendment. Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. I urge my colleagues to vote no on the amendment.
Thank you. Will you remark further on the amendment? If not, Mr. Clerk.
Immediate roll call vote has been ordered in the Senate. An immediate roll call vote has been ordered in the Senate. We're voting on House Bill number 5003. This is the amendment. This is Senate Amendment B for House Bill number 5003. This is not the bill. We're voting on the amendment. Senate Amendment B, House Bill number 5003, an act concerning workforce development and working conditions in the state. An immediate roll call vote has been ordered in the Senate on Senate Amendment B of House Bill number 5003.
the senators voted? The machine is locked. Mr. Clerk, give us the tally on the amendment.
Senate Amendment B of House Bill 5003. Total number voting 35. Total voting yea 11. Total voting nay 24. Absent not voting 1.
Amendment fails. Will you remark further on the bill before the chamber? Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. As I often do after an amendment fails, I do lament that fact. Again, I will just point out that amendment that would have eliminated that section regarding employment promissory notes failed on a party line vote, and I believe that is highly disappointing. You know, each one of the sections of this bill contributes to whether or not overall this is good policy for the state of Connecticut. I've mentioned a number of times already that 75 sections, and some of them extraordinarily good, that I would certainly applaud passage of, and other ones, frankly, toxic. Section 4 was one of those toxic sections, and had we adopted that amendment, you might have had some bipartisan compromise in this chamber. We would have been working together to pass a 200-page bill out of this Senate today. But instead, what we're going to have is a bill that is likely to end up as a party line vote at the end of the day, and it's going to be the majority's worldview, without a recognition that the minority party represents a significant portion of the population of this state. I represent a Senate district, much like the chairman does, and each of my colleagues here, 36 of us in here, each of us represent an equal number of people. And while we all have an equal voice in this room and an equal vote, it does not seem that the people that we represent are being acknowledged by the senators that are in the majority, because there is an unwillingness to adopt our amendments, to consider them as valid. I wish I had the data in front of me right now just to talk about how often an amendment gets adopted in this chamber offered by the minority. It's basically 0% of the time. And on the rare occasion that you do find agreement, or you find a situation where the majority is really put off by the idea of having to vote against one of our amendments, usually we pause and redraft the amendment so that we can put someone from the majority on it as well. It just happened the other day in a debate I had on a elections-related bill. So very interesting kind of stuff. Moving on, Section 5. I see that this is labeled something regarding the sub-minimum wage. And no, folks, this does not have anything to do with submarines or submarine sandwiches. This is about the sub-minimum wage. Maybe the good chairman can fill us in on what Section 5 does, what its policy is, and what its purpose is.
Thank you. Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. This section creates a task force that will study and take into account what good public policy should be to support persons with disabilities who earn less than the minimum wage. This is an issue that's come up before our committee in past years on more than one occasion, and the community of persons with disabilities and advocates for persons with disabilities is divided on the question of whether or not a person should earn the minimum wage or should earn less than the minimum wage. This task force is an effort to get people around the table to see if there are other possible ways to approach the issue rather than what is currently in statute. Thank you, Madam President, through you.
Thank you. Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I understand this is a task force, and I understand its purpose. Might I ask a question through you, Madam President? Are there currently restrictions on folks in the disability community earning less than the minimum wage currently, through you?
Thank you. Senator Kushner.
Through you, Madam President, there are current statutes that allow a person to pay less than the minimum wage to a person with disabilities.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. And if this task force gets together and suggests eliminating those opportunities, is there a possibility that this legislature may take up a bill to eliminate that current standard where we do allow folks in the disability community to earn less than the minimum wage? Through you.
Thank you, Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. Through you, there have been many bills in the past that have sought to eliminate those provisions from current statute and to provide that employers would have to pay the full minimum wage to certain persons with disabilities. Those bills have never passed. They've never come out of committee, to my knowledge, primarily because there is a disagreement within the community as to what's the best approach. And this effort is to bring people to the table and try and see if there are ways in which we could do better in terms of what would be required with regard to pay for members of the disability community. Through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Let me just say my reaction to this is that I'm not adamantly opposed to the task force existing or meeting and having a conversation. But what I am adamantly opposed to is any effort to create a task force for the purpose of creating a policy avenue, lane that would ultimately lead to the elimination of the sub-minimum wage. And that's what I'm afraid of when I see this, because I believe the policy that we currently have that allows employers to pay folks in the disability community less than the minimum wage is a good policy. And folks that say otherwise, they've got their signals crossed, because I think they live in an alternative reality where they believe that if they require people that are in the disability community to earn the minimum wage like someone else might, that somehow those folks will earn the minimum wage. And I'm here to tell you that won't happen. Those opportunities that folks in the disability community have today exist only because businesses are willing to pay them less than the minimum wage as an opportunity. That's why. And it's not because they're mean, awful people. It's because things have value in the world. No one, I've said this before, no one's going to pay $100,000 for a $20,000 car. No one's going to pay $500 for a $50 pair of shoes, and no one's going to pay someone more than they're worth as an employee. And that worth is not about the person's identity, it's about their ability to produce. And somebody that is an experienced professional who works in a job for many years, who has worked out all the kinks, obviously is more productive than someone's brand new to the job. And these opportunities are intended for people that are not in a position to produce as much. And therefore, they are compensated based on that reality. And what I'm fearful of is that by advancing this task force, you are advancing a mechanism that ultimately leads to an end to those opportunities. And that is something I'm extremely opposed to. Now, I understand that the task force doesn't say all that, but you got to understand that there's only really two views on this subject, and the good chairman laid them out for us. The people that believe that the sub-minimum wage should exist, and the people that don't. And I believe the sub-minimum wage needs to exist to make sure that these opportunities still do present themselves. By the way, somebody who's disabled can still earn the minimum wage. There's nothing stopping that from happening, and more power to them if they can get the job in competition with other folks. But what this is for people that wouldn't otherwise get any job opportunities at all. They would get no chance to go to work. The existing law provides that opportunity. It's fulfilling. I've been on site at some of these places where these folks are actually employed and doing a job. And I can see it when I deal with them, how thrilled they are that they feel that they are productive members of our society and they are contributing the best that they can. It would hurt it would hurt to get rid of those opportunities. And I would be disappointed if that happened. But I can tell you that people in the disability community that work in those jobs would be crushed. They would be crushed if that happened. I think this is a dangerous section because of that, Madam President. Again, I don't want to condemn it, because if there is a good faith effort here to try and find ways to provide more similar opportunities, I'm all for it. But if there is a goal that is connected with this task force to undermine the existence of the sub-minimum wage, I want to let folks know that I'm going to do everything I can to oppose that. If I'm here, you're going to have to get through me to get rid of it, and I'm going to use every tool in my toolkit to defend that population of people still having the freedom to participate in our economy and have productive jobs. So I just wanted to be on the record about that section, which was Section 5. So let's move on to Section 6, which is interesting that we put these two sections next to each other. We had the sub-minimum wage, and now we have the cannabis minimum wage. And who knows? I mean, when we start having minimum wages for every different job on earth, I mean, what's the point of having a minimum wage anymore? I don't even get it anymore. It just cracks me up, everything that happens in this place. So through you, Madam President, I'm hoping the chairman will enlighten us on what Section 6 is about.
Thank you. Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. Section 6, the pertinent new language in that starts on line 457, and it is very specific in instructing that the Labor Commissioner shall not recognize gratuities as part of the fair minimum wage. Unfortunately, with this new industry that's come into our state, there was an effort made to treat some of these cannabis workers as tipped workers. It did not. That approach did not survive examination by the Department of Labor. This codifies it so there can be no question going forward as to what is the appropriate wage for someone who works in a retail cannabis establishment. Through you, Madam President.
Thank you. Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I appreciate that answer. I find it to be accurate and on point. I know we've had this in the Labor Committee over the last couple of years. I've spoken with the Labor Commissioner about this subject as well. I don't believe that this is actually necessary. I believe the Labor Commissioner has always had the authority to stipulate the requirements that are in the bill, but I don't object to it being there either. But it is a good opportunity to just talk about what's going on here really more than anything, which is I believe that the state of Connecticut, in its zeal to establish the rules of the road for everyone who lives here and effectively deny the freedom and opportunity for people to make their own decisions in a lot of circumstances that I think are important where people maintain their autonomy, including employment, are effectively eliminating certain jobs from existence. Without rehashing the entire minimum wage debate, the minimum wage being dramatically increased, I think, to originally $15, and then with various increases based on the cost of living and so forth, it's now up in the $17 range. The net effect of that has been a loss of employment opportunities. And I hope people recognize that. This is what I said was going to happen when we debated it back in 2019. And the fact of the matter is that, like we just spoke about when it comes to the sub-minimum wage, on the subject of the minimum wage itself, people do not pay people more than they're worth for the job. Just like they don't pay for products that are worth more than the product. I just said you don't pay $100,000 for a $20,000 car and so on, and that's true. And people do not pay $18 an hour for a job that's worth $10 an hour. They just don't. So as much as the majority wants to congratulate themselves and pat themselves on the back that they achieved some magical thing by raising the minimum wage, and we gave everybody a raise, they didn't give anybody a raise. What happened was every job that was less than the minimum wage disappeared overnight because it was made illegal, effectively, for it to exist. And sure, some people that worked at those lower minimum wage numbers did get bumped up. But they did not get paid more for the same work. What happened is their job changed. The old $10 an hour job doesn't exist anymore. It's gone. So even if you were still employed and you're making $17 an hour, guess what? It's a different job. And we saw it out in industry. We saw businesses that used to have 10 employees making $12 an hour. They now have 6 employees making $18 an hour. So all those people are working harder and so forth. And sure, maybe those folks got a net benefit themselves. But all the other people lost their employment opportunities. Worse, you have industry trying to do things like automate, creating kiosks. You walk into McDonald's now and you got a screen in front of you instead of a person where you can make your order. Why does that happen? That happens because busybodies here in the majority party in the state of Connecticut told those businesses, we're going to make you pay so much for your employees, it's not worth having employees anymore, so you better find a way to use some technology. And they did that while patting themselves on the back and congratulating themselves that they gave the employees a raise. It's absurd. It's just unfortunate that it's not widely understood and people don't sit down to stop and think about what the ramifications of these policies are. They just listen to the quick raising the minimum wage. Oh, it sounds like a great idea. But only the actual employee and employer are in a position to negotiate the amount of pay that they get for the job, not the state of Connecticut. All the state of Connecticut can do is ban jobs. And that's what the minimum wage does, frankly, is it bans jobs. So we could go into that a lot more deeply here, but on this subject, as it has to do with the cannabis situation, this is another area where the state is saying to certain employers, we know that your employee is still making more than our required minimum wage. They're just making it through a combination of the base wage and their tips, but we're not going to allow that anymore. And ultimately what that does is creates a conflict now between what that employer is willing to offer to its employees and what those employees are willing to accept and what the state statute says. And in my view, all of these decisions should be made solely by the employer and the employee, and the people in this room, in this building, should have nothing to do with it, because all they do is create a mess. We had another bill, which I'm actually remarkably surprised and very pleased in the Labor Committee that is not in this Omnibus 75-page Italian combo sandwich bill that we have. It is the bill that would have said that grocery stores, and actually far more than grocery stores, their definition of grocery stores, of course, includes Home Depot, because that's kind of how they do definitions in this place. But that bill would have said that you can only have a certain number of automated checkout lanes. So here they go. They create a problem. Okay, we're going to jack up the minimum wage. Employers are going to get in a position where they can't afford to pay workers. The jobs go away. They turn to automation. They create a self-checkout lane. And here comes the Connecticut Democrats to the rescue. We're going to fix it. We're going to tell them they can't have too many self-checkout lanes. So guess what? Consumers are going to have to wait in longer lines. Congratulations. That's what you get. That's what you get when you have a barrage of bad policy on top of bad policy trying to fix the previous bad policy. That's what you get. Decades and decades of it here in Connecticut. So in this particular case, it applies to people that work for cannabis operations and effectively eliminates potentially the opportunity for some jobs. And that's, in my view, unfortunate. Section number 7. This should be a good one. Through you, Madam President, can the good chairman describe Section 7 to us, please?
Thank you, Senator Kushner.
Thank you, Madam President. Section 7 of this bill is a bill that has actually passed through this chamber in the past. This will provide that employees of Public Works Department, when they're called in an emergency situation, they will be provided with workers' compensation should they be injured during such time on their way to or from work. Through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I appreciate the good chairman's description of the section that is before us. Again, this is another, what once was a standalone bill, and should still be. You know, if the majority respected the process that we have followed, and more important than what we have followed is the process that is the expectation of the people we represent. To me, that should be the most important consideration. And the people on the street expect us to propose individual bills on individual topics, and then to have a public hearing on those bills where the public is actually noticed in advance properly with sufficient time and knowledge of what is being debated. And then it is put in front of them in its final form of what it's going to be voted on to actually discuss whether it has value, merit, or should proceed. And then the committee should take the bill up, make any changes, while all the time being very public about what is happening and transparent so the people on the street can know what is going on. And people that know this place and this business are like, they're dumbfounded by everything I'm saying because they're like, none of that actually happens. Are you kidding me? Because, you know, we make changes to bills, and then the substitute language is another famous thing that happens in this place. It doesn't go online. Nobody can see it. Only the people that are on the committee even have it. You got lobbyists out in the hallway trying to flag you down because they don't even know what's in the thing. It's a crazy, crazy system we have here. It's not transparent, it's not appropriate, and it's not the expectation of our constituents, which is my concern. And I would like very much to get us to a point where we're doing what the people expect us to be doing in here, which is to be debating on their behalf publicly, honestly, openly, and respectfully, recognizing fully that we have different views and we come from different backgrounds and perspectives. That's the beauty of representative government, is that we all come from someplace different in our own experiences, and we can add to the importance of things. But what we have to remember is that no matter what happens at the end of the day, we should always respect the rights of the minority. That's the basis of America's foundational principle. That's why we have a Bill of Rights, frankly. It's to prevent the majority from trampling the rights of the minority. And that is something I'm an expert at, being a member of this Republican minority in the Senate. It's having my rights trampled. So on the subject of portal to portal, this was a bill that we've had the last several years, a standalone bill. It's not utterly controversial in any way, although I don't think it's written very well. I think it's written too broadly. I brought this to the attention of the majority. I've offered amendments in the committee. I do appreciate the fact that the chairman on the subject of this bill has at least had a conversation or two with me with a seeming willingness to discuss it. But at the end of the day, nothing has ever changed. I always end up seeing the same bill with the language that I disagree with year in and year out. And here it is again. So it's a frustration for me because I recognize I'm in the minority. I'm one of 11 Republican senators in a room of 36 senators. I get it. And the majority has the power to do what they want. And they can either take my concerns into consideration or not. But what's frustrating is that it is so rare to have your concerns addressed by the majority. It's actually shocking. And it's because they don't have to. There's nothing requiring it. There's nothing forcing them to. There's no pressure upon them to do so. And that's partly because, frankly, it's disappointing, but most of the senators are not even in the room. I think that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of us right now. Oh, we have another senator over there. It's good. We're up to 6. It's a pretty good ratio, 6 out of 36. And even less people watching. I don't know if any press is watching the proceedings today. I don't know if they're going to report on anything that has been said here. Got no idea. I don't know if what they say is going to accurately depict what happened in this chamber. And consequently, I don't know that people back home know what's happening. And if they don't know, they can't be happy or sad or upset or anything. They just don't know. So, starting on lines 495 through line 507 is the meat, like they say on the sandwich, of this particular section of this bill, section 7. And it reads this way. It says, for an employee of a public works department, so this is specific about the public works department employees for the state of Connecticut. When such employee is subject to emergency calls while off duty by the terms of such employee's employment. That's one. And these are the situations being laid out for when that employee would be eligible for workers' compensation. And basically, it gives you 3 different circumstances. So the first one is while subject to emergency calls. Second one is when responding to a direct order to appear at such employer's work assignments, et cetera, et cetera. And 3, following 2 or more mandatory overtime work shifts, and so on. And my objection to this has always been that number 1 by itself is not sufficient. I totally get it. I don't want people to not get work comp when they deserve to get work comp any more than anyone else does. But giving people workers' compensation simply for being on call is not appropriate. It doesn't exist that way in the private sector. It doesn't exist that way in the public sector generally. So what I would like to do is see it apply when you are on call and you're called in. But it doesn't do that. It's only when you're on call, also when you're called in, or following 2 or more mandatory work cycles. So with that, Madam President, I have an amendment. It is LCO 5546. I ask that the clerk please call this amendment and I be given leave of the chamber to summarize it.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk.
LCO number 5546, Senate Amendment C.
Thank you, Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. This is a very straightforward amendment. What it does is it takes Part 1 and Part 2 and combines them. So the amendment in line 497 would strike the Roman numeral 2 when, and insert and is, which would mean that 1 and 2 are now combined, and change in line 499 what was Roman numeral 3 to Roman numeral 2. Because effectively we would go from having 3 separate circumstances to combining 1 and 2, and the third one would just be the second in this particular case. I move adoption. I'd like a roll call vote.
Thank you. The question is on adoption. We will certainly have a roll call vote. And Senator Kushner, would you like to remark on the amendment?
Thank you, Madam President. I would urge my colleagues to vote no on this amendment.
Thank you. Will you remark further on the bill? Will you remark further, on the amendment? If not, I will open the voting machine, Mr. Clerk.
Immediate roll call vote has been ordered in the Senate. We're now voting on Senate Amendment C. This is not the bill. We're voting on Senate Amendment C of House Bill number 5003 as amended. An immediate roll call vote in the Senate. We're voting on Senate Amendment C for House Bill number 5003 as amended, an act concerning workforce development and working conditions in the state. An immediate roll call vote in the Senate on Senate Amendment C. This is not the bill. An immediate roll call vote in the Senate on Senate Amendment C for House Bill number 5003 as amended.
Have all the senators voted? The machine is locked. Mr. Clerk, the tally, if you will.
Senate Amendment C of House Bill 5003. Total number voting 36. Total voting yea 11. Total voting nay 25. Absent not voting 0.
Amendment fails.